In today's video, we're covering US 53 and we're also going to see some bad control cities in Wisconsin. US 53 is 404 miles going through Wisconsin and Minnesota. At the beginning of US 53 in La Crosse, we're now signed north for Onalaska. When we meet I-90, we're now running concurrently with it and we don't have any control cities at all whatsoever. When US 53 leaves I-90, it is now signed east for Madison and we're still signed north for Onalaska. At exit 6 for Main Street, we're now signed north for Holman. This exit was requested by the times are here. At an interchange with Wisconsin 35, we're now signed north for Galesville. This should be Eau Claire. This is also a bad control city. On the mileage sign, Galesville is demoted to a secondary and Eau Claire is now our primary in 67 miles. In Galesville, we're now signed north for Ettrick, which is horrible, but technically going straight is the fastest way to Eau Claire from here, but only by 2 minutes. So if Wisconsin 93 isn't signed north for Eau Claire, just let US 53 be signed north for Eau Claire instead. On the mileage sign, the exact same scenario happens with Ettrick now being our secondary and Eau Claire is now back on the bottom line again in 58 miles. When we meet Wisconsin 95, we're now signed for Whitehall and Arcadia. Whitehall is for US 53 and Arcadia is for Wisconsin 95. Whitehall was also a bad control city, but of a mileage sign, Eau Claire is now back on the bottom line in 44 miles. When Wisconsin 95 leaves us, it is still signed for Arcadia. If you're going to Eau Claire via US 53, it's actually faster to bypass Whitehall and reconnect with US 53 after Whitehall by turning right here. In Whitehall, we meet Wisconsin 121 and we're now signed north for Pigeon Falls and Osseo, which are both bad choices. This should still be Eau Claire here. Of course, on the mileage sign, though, Eau Claire is now back on the bottom line in 37 miles. Wisconsin 121 was actually concurrent with us, and when it leaves us in Pigeon Falls, it is now signed for Northfield, and we're now signed north solely for Osseo. Once again, this should just be Eau Claire. If you said Eau Claire would go back on the bottom line, you're correct. It is now back on the bottom line again in 31 miles. When we meet US 10, which you should also check my videos on, we're now signed for Strum and Eau Claire. Strum is for US 10 and Eau Claire is for US 53. But turning right here is actually the faster way to Eau Claire from here, so US 53 shouldn't even have a control city. Also, Durant should be signed on US 10 instead of Strum. When US 53 leaves US 10, at this point, signing Eau Claire is now fine again. On the mileage sign, Eau Claire is the only city on it in 17 miles. When we meet I-94, we're now signed north for Eau Claire and Superior. First, we had bad control cities, then inconsistencies with them, but now provincialism. Wisconsin, have you ever heard of a city called Duluth? At exit 85, we meet Gulf Road. This exit was requested by the times are here. Even on the mileage sign, Superior is on the bottom line in 133 miles. Just sign Duluth, Wisconsin DOT. At exit 140, we meet 18.5 Avenue, signed for Rice Lake. This exit was requested by the times are here. When we meet US 2, it is signed east for Ashland, and we're now running concurrently with westbound US 2. Thankfully, on the mileage signs, Duluth is on the bottom line in 15 miles. When US 2 leaves us, it is signed west for the business district of the University of Wisconsin at Superior, and we're still signed north for Duluth. We are now about to tag along with I-535 signed north for Duluth. We're now crossing over the St. Louis River into Minnesota, and here we get our interstate version of the Minnesota State welcome sign. At I-535's northern terminus, we meet I-35 and we have no control cities at all whatsoever. Going southbound on I-35, we're now signed north for 21st Avenue West, which I think is fine. When we meet Minnesota 194, we're now signed for Grand Rapids and Range Cities. Grand Rapids is for Minnesota 194 and Range Cities is for US 53. Also, Range Cities refers to the Iron Range. Here we meet Cottonwood Avenue. This intersection was requested by Geography Train. Here we meet Maple Grove Road. This was also requested by Geography Train. Here we meet Burning Tree Road, which is yet again requested by Geography Train. When Minnesota 194 leaves us, it gains 2 US 2 as a control city and everything else remains the same. On the mileage sign, though, we do get a specific control city, this being Virginia in 55 miles. When we meet Minnesota 169, we're now signed north for our last control city, this being International Falls. On the mileage sign, we can see that International Falls is on the bottom line in 93 miles. In International Falls, we meet Minnesota 11. This intersection was requested by Seahawks fan for life. US 71 is now joining us headed towards the border. This intersection was also requested by Seahawks fan for life. And here is the end of US 53 and 71 at the Canadian border, which then turns into Ontario Highway 71, which was also requested by Seahawks fan for life. In Canada, we get a sign that says Bridge to USA. After crossing through the border in International Falls, we get a mileage sign that has Virginia as the secondary in 94 miles and Duluth is our primary in 159. In Duluth, we meet I-35 and I-535 again, and we're now running concurrently with I-535 again, signed south for Wisconsin. Minnesota, just sign Superior here. Stop being provincial. We're now crossing back over the St. Louis River back into Wisconsin. On this overhead sign, we're signed south for Superior. Here, US 53 exits itself and we get no control cities, and we can also see the Wisconsin State welcome sign back there. When we meet US 2, we're now signed for Ashland and Spooner. Ashland is for US 2 and Spooner is for US 53. Also, Eau Claire should be signed here, not Spooner. Like, why is it signed? When US 2 leaves us, it is still signed east for Ashland, and we're still signed south for Spooner, but we also get Eau Claire as a control city now. On the mileage sign, Eau Claire is on the bottom line in 131 miles, and Spooner is our secondary in 56. We're now running concurrently with US 63, and we have no control cities at all whatsoever. When US 63 leaves us, it is now signed south for Spooner and Shell Lake. When we meet Wisconsin 70, we're now signed south for Rice Lake. This is also a bad choice like Spooner was, and also like Spooner, this should be Eau Claire here. On the mileage sign, Eau Claire is back on the bottom line in 81 miles, and Rice Lake is now our secondary. In Rice Lake, we meet Wisconsin 48, and we're now signed south for Eau Claire. When we meet I-94, we have no control cities, which is fine since we're about to parallel it for a bit. But for some reason, going westbound on I-94, we're now signed south for Brackett, which is an unincorporated community. Just sign nothing here. On the mileage sign, Osseo was our secondary in 17 miles, and La Crosse is our primary in 80. In Onalaska, we meet I-90 east for Madison, and we're now concurrent with a westbound sign for Minnesota. Just sign Rochester. Stop being provincial, Wisconsin. When US 53 leaves I-90, we're now signed south for La Crosse. And here is US 53's southern terminus at US 1461 in Wisconsin 16. After Wisconsin's bad, inconsistent, and provincial control cities, let's review what the control city should actually be. The control cities for Northbound should be Onalaska, then Madison when you're concurrent with I-90, then Onalaska again when you leave I-90, then Holman, then Eau Claire. I'd skip over Galesville, Ettrick, Whitehall, Pigeon Falls, and Osseo. Then Durham when you meet US 10 and are concurrent with it, then Eau Claire again when you leave US 10 and Duluth, just like don't sign Superior at all. Then 21st Avenue West after I-535's end, then Virginia when you meet Minnesota 194, and then finally International Falls. And the control cities for Southbound should be Duluth, then Superior, don't sign Wisconsin, then Eau Claire, skip over Spooner and Rice Lake, then nothing when you meet I-94, don't sign Brackett, then La Crosse and Osseo, then Holman and La Crosse when you get closer to La Crosse, then Onalaska and La Crosse after Holman, then Rochester when you meet and run concurrently with I-90, and then La Crosse when you leave I-90. If you enjoyed today's video, please subscribe. I also have others on my channel where I cover more US highways, and I also cover interstates and state highways, and I also look into control cities to see if they are worthy of control city status. Anyway, see you guys next time. Bye!